dress. I went to the Met Gala in 2018, and I was going to wear this dress or another one. I was going to modify it and make it even more. That's not a word, but it is now. And I couldn't decide between the two, and I ultimately chose this red one. And this one I had always wanted, and it was worn by another incredible actress, Can, a few years ago. But I loved it, so I was like, oh, beautiful piece is beautiful. Should be worn many times. She wore it so beautifully.
The coordinated legal assault that was supposed to destroy Justin Baldoni's legal team has just hit a massive wall. And honestly, it's collapsing in real time right before our eyes. Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. So, yesterday we sat down and talked about this new lawsuit that just got filed in California, and it's targeting Brian Friedman and Melissa Nathan. We went through all these really bizarre allegations that a woman named Alexa Nicholas is making, where she's claiming that some kind of smear website was created by Brian Friedman. But here's the thing that jumped out at me right away. In this entire lawsuit, she never really explains how she actually knows that Brian Friedman was the one who made it. There's no paper trail, no direct evidence, no nothing. She also can't seem to connect Melissa Nathan to this so-called conspiracy in any meaningful way, other than Stephanie Jones over here claiming that Melissa made a website about her, which, by the way, she didn't even make. And I'm sitting here going through all of this thinking, wait a minute, I think I've figured something out, you guys. I really think I've connected some dots here that are going to make this whole thing make a lot more sense. Because the more I looked at this case, the faster it started falling apart for me. Okay, so here's where it gets interesting. I had been hearing some whispers floating around, and I always tell you all to take this stuff as rumors until we can verify, but I had been speaking with some sources who are kind of embedded in this industry, right? People who see things happening behind the scenes. And what I kept hearing was that certain individuals who had made it publicly known that they had issues with various players in this drama, whether it was with Brian Friedman, whether it was with Justin Baldoni, whether it was with Melissa Nathan, whether it was with Scooter Braun, whether it was with Wayfair Studios, whoever, I kept hearing that there had been some people out there suggesting, or maybe even encouraging, these individuals to file lawsuits. And a whole lot of this energy was being specifically targeted at Brian Friedman. And we all know by now that Blake Lively really cannot stand Brian Friedman. Like, this is not even a question at this point. She genuinely believes that the statements he's made to the press in relation to this entire case qualify as defamation. She said as much. Her team has made it clear. This is an established fact. But here's what's really strange to me. With all of that hostility, with all of that belief that he's defaming her, she's not actually suing Brian Friedman for defamation. Think about that for a second. If you genuinely believe someone is defaming you, and you have the resources that Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds have, why wouldn't you file that lawsuit? Unless there's something else going on here. What she has done, though, is fascinating. On the docket, she has gone as far as humanly possible to have anything struck from the record that he tries to put on there. You remember when he posted on the docket about his affidavit related to Taylor Swift, and this whole alleged possible extortion situation, or threat that was made. She immediately moved to have it struck, and her team argued that it was scandalous. She's currently got a sanctions motion going against him, trying to get him formally sanctioned by the court. She had her team go after Kevin Fritz during the depositions with a formal reprimand because they claimed he was unruly and rude to Mel Gversky, who is Blake's attorney. And then there's this pattern that I can't ignore. You've got a former client or spouse of Mr. Friedman who filed a lawsuit because he went on to then represent Justin Baldoni while his spouse actually was in the middle of suing Justin Baldoni. And now here you have another spouse of someone who claims their husband was a client, also suing him. That's two, just on that specific angle. But Blake has taken it even further than that. She's literally gone as far as to try to get him completely removed from the New York case entirely. She's asking the court to strip his ability to even practice or try this case in New York. And here's the thing. All of these moves have effectively rendered him almost ineffective for the trial, at least in terms of being the public-facing person, because she's placed him in this position where statements he made are now sitting before the court as potential defamation. She's trying to get him thrown off the case completely. So now he's relying on other people on his team to do the heavy lifting, lawyers like Alexandra Shapiro, Jonathan Bach, Ellen Graff. But now, on top of all of that, you have two brand new lawsuits against him, and both of them feel very much like Blake Lively and Stephanie Jones have a bone to pick, and they're not letting go. And I don't know about you, but when I see someone trying this hard to get rid of another person, trying this many different angles to neutralize them, I have to ask, what do they know? What are they so afraid of? Because you don't go to these lengths unless there's something there that genuinely terrifies you. So then I started thinking about the bigger picture here. Why are they so heavily focused on trying to go after his business? Why go after his livelihood, his reputation, his ability to practice law? And then I had a thought that kind of stopped me in my tracks. I've been hearing that there's just been this heavy push behind the scenes, right? Like I told you, they're trying to allegedly get people to come forward and sue. And I remembered that in some of the very early text messages that were released in this case, Jennifer Abel had made a mention that Brian Friedman isn't afraid to go head-to-head with WME. She specifically said he's not afraid of WME. And that stuck with me. Then I had this feeling, this connection that started forming in my mind. Stephanie Jones of Jones Works, her husband Jason Hodis is an agent, and he's employed by WME. Think about that for a second. Stephanie and Jason's ties to WME are direct and personal. Jason works there every day. Stephanie is his wife. Jason is operating inside the WME world, the same world where Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds are not just clients, but major clients. Their agent is Warren Zavala at WME. So then I thought, what if WME is helping with all of this behind the scenes? What if they went full Ari Emanuel mode on this? What if a whole lot of this coordination, this effort to go after Brian Friedman, isn't just about Blake's personal vendetta? What if it's bigger than that? Think about it this way. A lawyer who isn't afraid of WME would be a perfect target for WME to want to take down. If you're an agency that powerful and you have clients who are entangled in legal battles, and there's an attorney out there who has shown he will stand up to you, who has shown he's not intimidated by your power, wouldn't you want to neutralize that threat? Wouldn't you want to make sure that lawyer can't effectively go after your clients? So trying to take out the guy that's going to go after your clients starts to make a certain kind of sense. I'm not saying this is definitely happening, but I'm saying the pieces are all there on the board. WME is not without its own drama, its own scandals, its own problems. They've had lawsuits. They've had major investor issues going on because they went private after being public. There are massive class action lawsuits happening right now against them related to when they went private and the buyout structure they used with investors. There's the whole complicated split between IMG and WME. There's Ari Emanuel moving off as CEO of WME and moving over to IMG, which is more focused on the WWE and mixed martial arts world. And there's a whole separate lawsuit going on against IMG with MMA fighters. There's just messiness all around in that ecosystem, is what I'm trying to say. And when there's messiness, there's motivation to control the narrative, to protect your interests, to make sure that lawyers who might dig into that messiness are either neutralized or discredited. So I was looking through Stephanie Jones's lawsuit, and I'm asking myself, how does she tie all these different people together? How does she connect these dots in a way that makes legal sense? And more importantly, I reached out to some other sources to get more background on this current lawsuit that Alexa Nikolas filed. And you guys, this is absolutely bananas. Here's what I found out. Alexa Nikolas had no relationship with Melissa Nathan. Her company never had a relationship with Melissa Nathan. Her ex-husband never had a relationship with Melissa Nathan. I did some serious digging, and here's what I uncovered. Back in 2022, Brian Friedman was brought in as more of a strategic advisor, kind of an attorney that helped direct how Michael Malash managed the legal fallout from his ex-wife suing him. But here's the key detail. He wasn't actually on any of the legal cases themselves. Brian didn't file into Alexa's lawsuit that she filed against him. He wasn't the lead attorney, and his firm didn't represent Michael for that specific lawsuit. When Michael filed a countersuit or a malicious prosecution claim later on, again, Friedman wasn't involved in that either. And here's the really important timeline piece. During the time that all of this litigation was happening between Alexa and Michael, Melissa Nathan did not have TAG. She didn't own TAG yet. She was still working under Matthew Hills at that point. And Matthew Hills never represented Michael Malash, ever. Not once. I was told by a source very close to the situation that Melissa Nathan has absolutely no idea who this woman Alexa Nikolas is. She had never heard of Alexa Nikolas until this lawsuit was filed against her. That's how disconnected this all is. The only connection they can think of that ties Alexa into this whole mess is the fact that Stephanie Jones named Alexa in her lawsuit and kind of confused and muddied the waters by adding in a bunch of anonymous websites that exist for various people, and not all of those people are actually connected to each other. Not all of them were clients of Brian Friedman. Not all of them were clients of Melissa Nathan. Some of these websites were created at a time when some of the people they mentioned as involved parties, like Katie Cassie's and Jen Abel and such, were actually at JonesWorks, and Melissa was at Hillock Strategies. So let me ask you a question. If JonesWorks is going to try to tie in all this Alexa stuff, doesn't that create a problem? I mean, Katie Cassie's was Stephanie's own employee in 2022. Katie was working for Stephanie during that time. Does that mean Stephanie might have had something to do with those websites? I'm not saying she did, but if we're going to follow the logic of the lawsuit, why are we asking those questions? And here's another piece. Stephanie wasn't Michael Malash's PR agent either during that time. So there appears to be no established relationship between Melissa Nathan and Brian Friedman while she was at Hillock Strategies in New York. They weren't working together. They weren't coordinating. There's no paper trail connecting them during that period when these alleged websites were supposedly created. So I decided to take a really close look at the actual divorce judgment for Alexa Nikolas. I mean, I went through it line by line because I wanted to see what it actually says, not what people are claiming it says. And what I found is pretty damning for this new lawsuit. As stipulated in her judgment, it clearly states that each party acknowledges that by entering into this negotiated stipulated judgment, he or she knowingly waives his or her rights to a full evidentiary hearing on the merits with respect to issues pertaining to assets and liabilities, the valuation of assets and liabilities, spousal support, or any other issue arising from or relating to the parties' marriage. Let me translate that for you. She waived her rights to any issue that arose out of that marriage when she signed that stipulated agreement.
That's not a small thing.
That's a fundamental legal waiver that courts take very seriously. But it gets even stronger. She also stated that under her own personal judgment, she did not rely on the statement, warranty, or representation of any other person. The document says they've entered into this agreement free of fraud or coercion or undue influence.
She signed off on that.
She agreed to that language. And then there's this part that really stands out. It says, the purpose of the stipulated judgment is to settle and to determine all presently existing personal and property rights of the parties with respect to each other and to satisfy such obligations, claims, and rights which she and he may have against the other of the date hereof in the manner set forth in the stipulated judgment. It is the mutual intention and desire of petitioner and respondent to immediately effect by way of this judgment a full and complete final settlement of all of his or her property rights, present and future, and to irrevocably adjust and determine all legal obligations of any nature which may exist with respect to each party and by reason of their marriage, and to fully and completely resolve and settle any and all issues arising out of or in connection with the relationship of the parties. The marital relationship. They agreed when they went into this that they were doing a mediation instead of going through lawyers, and the mediation offices were at Tara Scott, and Tara was the mediator, and they worked with this mediator, and neither one of them had attorneys for this mediation. So they just used a mediator to work everything out. She agreed that she shall pay and hold the respondent free, and he was the respondent, and harmless from any and all encumbrances, obligations, liabilities, including tax liabilities, liens, debt, and debts regarding the assets awarded to her. Let me break down what she actually walked away with. She got a car. She got some home decor. She had some of her own personal possessions. She got a Chase checking account. She walked away with her pension plan from when she was with SAG. He walked away with a BMW, his own jewelry, some of the furniture from their home, checking accounts with City National Bank, RBC, Bank of America, and any interest in Rye. For the liabilities, she was responsible for medical bills of about $2,500, a gas bill, and she had a tax lien that she owed in the amount of $12,173. And in 2014, she had another tax lien in the amount of $22,250. And the judgment specifically says that she has to pay those on her own. It says she is responsible for the entirety of the liabilities owed to the federal government for taxes for the years 2013 and 2014, and that he is being held harmless for those liabilities. They were only married for 4 years. So, he walks away essentially with all of the money that he had prior to the marriage. She walks away with what she had prior to the marriage. And she held him harmless. Then it gets into spousal support. It says the respondent shall pay petitioner as and for spousal support the sum of $2,300 per month, continuing on the first of each month thereafter until petitioner's remarriage, death of either party, further order of the court, or through the payment made on August 1st, 2019. So she would get about a year and 2 months of spousal support total. And then it says, no spousal support shall be paid by respondent to petitioner after August 1st of 2019. And she waives her right to receive support after August 1st of 2019. And she understands she'll never be able to seek spousal support regardless of any change in circumstances as to the condition of her health, income, assets, debts, expenses, or any other circumstances. She agreed willingly and voluntarily to the termination of the spousal support on August 1st of 2019. He waived forever receiving any support from her. And then there's a whole mutual release section of her divorce decree, okay? It waives any claim to or right to income and property of the other. They release, relinquish, and renounce and waive any right or claim to any other income thereafter accruing or being earned by property which is received. So regardless of what happens later, when she files the lawsuit against Michael in 2021, back in 2019, she repeated over and over and over in her stipulated agreement that she held him harmless, and he held her harmless, and this divorce agreement and judgment resolved all of their disputes permanently. So I don't know what's going on with Alexa, but I can tell you that this lawsuit appears to be perhaps an opportunity to try to capitalize on the massive attention that is being given right now in the widespread media coverage of the Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni situation. Maybe she's trying to make herself known in that way. I'm not here to disparage Alexa. I want to be clear about that. But it would appear that this is an attempt to get money, right? And here's another timeline piece that matters. She attempted to sue him in 2021, which is not long after her spousal support ran out. And she's also suing Kat Tenbarge for defamation. And on her YouTube channel, she was saying at one point that she didn't believe Blake Lively, but now here she is suddenly validating Blake Lively's claims. But she still can't answer the basic question of how Melissa Nathan fits into any of this. And can she explain how Katie Cassis, who she references in her lawsuit, worked for Jones Works when this lawsuit was allegedly created? And you know what else? So did Jen Abel. I did a little bit of a deep dive into the look-back fraud website that she claims is part of this whole conspiracy against her. That whole thing about her being part of a criminal conspiracy, it's set up by who knows, I don't know who actually created this site. But the premise of this website isn't even about Alexa. In fact, it's not about her at all when you actually read it. The website is primarily about an attorney named Joe Dunn who was fired from his position at the California State Bar. He also was a former state bar chief. Joe Dunn lied about overseas travel and expenses. A judge ruled he was facing discipline, and he was a close ally of a lawyer named Tom Girardi. He was in the headlines for doing all kinds of stuff, and there were questions about money he received from Girardi and others. There was a big scandal surrounding him. So the website goes into all of that, and then it mentions Alexa in connection to Joe Dunn, suggesting that Joe Dunn and his daughter were friends with Alexa and that he helped coordinate allegations. But the website actually isn't an indictment of Alexa at all. If anything, it frames her as potentially being taken advantage of by this lawyer. The website talks about how Joe Dunn would find ways to prey on young, impressionable women and help them find attorneys and shape false legal claims so he could recover funds. That's the actual allegation. And then they link up these different attorneys that they call ambulance chasers, who are supposedly part of the scheme. And then the influencer army they list includes Alexa Nicole Nicholas, Shannon Ruth, who famously accused Nick Carter, Melissa Schumann, who famously accused Nick Carter, and several others. And then it lists different victims that they claim were shook down through this process, including names like Axl Rose, Chris Brown, Diplo, Trey Songz, Nick Carter, Conor McGregor, Jonah Hill, Russell Brand, Ansel Elgort, Bryan Singer, Snoop Dogg, and Dak Prescott. Now, some of those guys, like Russell Brand, are actually facing charges in the UK, so I'm not super clear on all of that. I know these other men were accused of various things. But when I saw this, I thought, maybe this is someone that's obsessed with the Backstreet Boys, because 2 of the people on that list are accusers of Nick Carter. The website isn't really an indictment on Alexa, but rather an indictment on Joe Dunn apparently preying on these women. It claims Joe Dunn and his daughter are friends with Alexa and they coordinate allegations against Michael Malash and that he orchestrates allegations against Trey Songz, Chris Brown, and more. And they're literally tying all these different lawsuits and allegations to this group. If we take the website at just face value, Alexa actually isn't portrayed as the bad person in the situation. Rather, they're framing Alexa on this website as some sort of victim of this lawyer essentially taking advantage of her. And at worst, this group of lawyers that are accused of doing this are essentially being accused of helping women file false claims. And you have to take into account that some of these people probably did nothing wrong. The allegations they filed could have very well had merit. Some may have not. I again don't know. But regardless of all of this, one website is more complicated than the other. And again, these are from 2022 and 2024. Both fall outside of the statute of limitations. And her ex-husband never worked with Melissa Nathan. Jed Wallace, I don't believe, named her ex-husband as one of his clients in that lawsuit. And all of these people at one point or another worked at very different places with no connection to each other. What Stephanie Jones and Blake Lively are doing, in my opinion, is messing with people, thinking that they have something that they don't, trying to get people to bury Friedman for whatever reason. Maybe he's too much of a threat to WME. My final thought is that this feels like a coordinated deflection tactic. Blake Lively hasn't been filing anything new in her case because they've presented what they can present. She's waiting for rulings on summary judgment and dispositive motions. Alexa files her lawsuit on the same day they're in settlement discussions, hoping to garner more press and muddy the waters. They can't win in court right now, but they can try to create smoke and mirrors. This case is going to fall apart, and so will all the others. That's my final thought. So tell me what your thoughts are in the comments below. Do you think they're going to keep looking for people to file lawsuits? What do you think their real motive is? Make sure to sound off in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. Also, hit that subscribe button and drop a thumbs up on the way out. Goodbye, everyone.